One thing that these guys might, who are in the audience right now, might have faded out for a little bit was where we talk about white girls, because a lot of the Singaporean market, Singaporean guys, they don't valorize or idealize the white girl as much as the Singaporean Chinese girl or the Malay girl or whatever, or the Indian girl, the local girl. And I think that's just common because growing up in a Western country, you're in Amsterdam, I grew up in Canada, we're surrounded by white people. So it's natural for us to idealize white people and white girls because that's what we see, that's what we're exposed to. So in Singapore, you're exposed to Asians, obviously Singaporeans. So it's usually more about the girl next door. That's the one. So there's more attainability there. If I were to ask you, what's your ideal girl like? Most people don't start immediately going to thinking about some movie star or like Angelina Jolie or Jessica Alba or something. They start describing that girl they've been fantasizing about at work or school or something. So let's talk about that. I polled some of the members of the Aura Academy, so for some questions for Bonsai. And it's only his second day in Singapore, but he's had quite a lot of experience just in the dating world. So we're going to ask him some Singapore-specific questions. Okay, so the first one is, and it's important that Singaporeans realize how unique their situation is with their parents. So most single Singaporeans still live with their parents until they're 35. Anyone can help me out? Why is that? Are there any reasons for that?
Only after 35 can they buy their own flat.
Okay, you could buy before 35, but there are major incentives for after, correct?
If you're a single, you can only buy after 35.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay, so it's even worse.
The only way you can buy before 35 is you're gonna get hitched.
Okay.
If you're married.
Oh, you're engaged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you could have a 6-year engagement when you buy a house, 6 years, and then you get a divorce? Or you don't get married, just break off the engagement? Would that work?
If you want to buy a house, I think within 6 months after the sales and purchase agreement, you must submit your marriage certificate.
Okay, so you got to get married in 6 months. I figured the government would have some back. Okay, right. So
is this by law?
Yeah. It's by law.
I know, right? So
that's how the government here encourages family.
Oh, I see.
Well, devil's in your personal life.
Yeah.
So I come from a country where there's a famous prime minister who said that the state has no business in the bedrooms of the nation. That was where he legalized gay sex and so forth. That was way back in the 60s. So it's pretty new for me for the government to do that. But HDB flats are heavily subsidized properties. So if you could buy private condominiums, but now we're looking at London prices, New York prices, whereas at the HDB flat, that would be like Lincoln, Nebraska rental price or
those in Singapore, I think
they're right up there with Hong Kong and Tokyo.
The 7 figures or close to 7-figure range.
I was ridiculously. The NUS had set me up with a housing stipend, and I was able to rent an apartment that was pretty tiny. It was smaller than the one I had in Beijing, where I was renting for like $700 a service apartment. The one I found out that in Singapore, the apartment that I was renting ended up being sold for over $2 million. Which is pretty ridiculous because it didn't feel like $2 million to me. It's like, damn, that guy. Okay, so, all right. So what happens then is that if you're under 35, I'm actually turning 35, but if you're, how old are you now?
23.
23. You're 23. Okay. So if you were living here, you would be living at home. That would be the normal situation. What I've recommended to some guys who have finished college and their military service, which is 2 years, and then do another 4 years of university, by the time you finish that, you are about 24 years old. And at that point, you start to get a career, you get a job, and you're able to afford rent that you could split. In an HDB flat, for instance, you could split it with 3 guys, and you each pay $800 to $1,000 each. And that's doable, but a lot of guys, for most guys, even if they can handle the economics, there's another factor, which is, anyone help me out here? Has anyone tried to leave the home?
Yeah, based on ethics, right? Based on Singaporean ethics, for most of us, we aren't supposed to leave. If we were to just leave our family before we were to get married, we are counted to be unloyal to our family.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's this right or wrong thing. It's a pretty gray area. You know, as someone who teaches ethics, I think it shouldn't be called ethics. That's just propriety. It's a different thing, like rules of thumb. But that's a situation that's very sensitive here. So if the guys, so some guys just say, look, mom, dad, I'm growing up, and if the dad's cool with it, they're cool people, they can move out like the rest of the world. But in many cases, there's so much pressure that the moms cry during these conversations, and they refuse to let them leave. Now, let's just say then, for the sake of argument, that for the time being, they have to live at home.
Okay.
Do you have any tips for closing logistics for getting sexual when you live with mom and dad?
Okay, if you have to live at home, the best thing to do, like personally, if you're taking a girl home, is to go to a hotel. Like actually buy a room there to spend the night there. That's probably the best option. Because I know the laws here are pretty strict, so doing it in public is probably not the best thing to do. But yeah, like getting a hotel is probably the best thing then. Like I've done something like this in LA when I was having family over at my place. So I couldn't like really bring a girl back home when my grandparents are there. So I actually had to buy like a motel where we stayed the night.
So was there a point at which it would be ideal to pop the, well, it wouldn't be a question per se, but to make that move? Would you just do it without getting verbal agreement from her, and then, or was it just, did you ask her, hey, you want to get a hotel? Was it like that?
No, like you don't really want to bring it up that you were going to get a hotel. It just happens you guys stopped at the hotel, and it's like, hey, this is my place, by the way. I'm just staying here for a while.
Okay, so you booked the room before, or did
no,
you guys check in?
You actually book when you take the girl home, because you never know
Right.
if you actually end up taking a girl home. You know, so you don't want to waste too much money.
Right.
But,
did you get any objections at that point?
It does get weird when you're like paying. So you don't. The girl feels a little bit cheap then when that happens, because they feel like but like when you talk a certain way to a girl where it's very sexual, and she knows what's coming, then it's usually not that big of a deal. It's just like, okay, two people want to have sex with each other. Now we just have to figure out a way to do it, right? So then the hotel thing becomes less of an issue. But you have to set it up that way. That's important. If you set it up in a way where you guys are just talking, having a good time, and then ending up leaving together for some reason, when there's no sexual conversation going on, yeah, it gets really awkward. But if you're right from the start very sexual about it, she accepts that, she wants to play along, okay, then it's fine.
So you don't want to ever bring it up, because if you bring it up, then it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's this awkward thing. So it's just a smooth transition, and you say, oh, this is my place.
Yeah.
And then you just go right up and you pay for the room and everything.
Yeah.
And if she wants it, she's not going to say anything. She knows that this is how it works.
That's where like really good persuasion skills and seduction skills come in, when she objects. Because
Did she object in that
I
instance?
think she did. She might have, or maybe she talked a little bit about it. But like what you want to do then is like pump her stake, meaning you change her emotional mind. So what I did was when we got out of the car, I actually gave her like a piggyback ride. So when she came on my back, and I was like running towards the hotel, and we were like singing songs together and like things like that. So like there's no way I'm gonna give her time to logically think about this situation. And so by singing songs, like doing the piggyback ride, things like that, like we'll make sure that. And if she does object, what you can do then is, this is what I like to do, is to start kissing her and like physically touching her, so that like that logical mind will shut off then, right? So anything that you want to do at that point is very emotional. So kissing, like piggyback ride, hugging, and being very physical will always help.
Yeah, just as a caveat, like so, when he's saying that you're shutting off the logical mind, it's not because you're tricking or manipulating a girl into it, but it's that the way that psychology happens and the way it works is attractions and emotion. So everybody acts actually on their emotions, and it's the logical mind, the rational mind, that rationalizes what the emotional side has done. So what you don't want to ever have happen is the objections will come up when it's a major state break, right? So in this case, you're pumping her body temperature, you're arousing her. What's happened for a bunch of the members and my other clients in Singapore is if they're going to do a close in a hotel room, what they'll do is just arouse her, get her really horny, and then you're basically making out, but then you can't do that last thing. And then at that point, you've aroused her so much that she will want to finish it off. So that's another way to go.
Yeah. I think actually that's like the best way to overcome the last objection of what some people call LMR, last minute resistance, by arousing her so much that she really wants it. Like that to me is like the best way to overcome it. Mm-hmm. Like you can do all sorts of shit where you act like you're not affected, or the best way really is to arouse a girl to the point where she really wants it. So study up on like the what do you call those, erogenous zones on the women, so that you know what arouses a woman. And once you know that, if you can practice that a little bit, you'll get better over time. And you'll see as you practice that certain things work and certain things don't. You'll get live feedback, but you'll get better over time. So if you want to get better at that, one thing I would advise you to do is, if you're already seeing someone, practice with that girl a lot. Like a lot, like 3 times a day if you have to, because like the next girl that meets you, she will have way better sex, and if girls have really good sex with you, they want to keep you around.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is for the betterment of all womankind. I mean, just giving them pleasure. Well, one thing that Asian guys have as a hang-up that I found is this occurs in Asian Americans as well as for Asians in Singapore and elsewhere in Asia I've been, is the lack of sexual confidence. Now this actually hasn't been the case in China, in mainland China, from the players I see there. And there was this really interesting poll, I think by Durex, on how many sexual partners the average man had in each country. And it was astounding because most of them were around 8, and of course this is an online anonymous poll, so people, you have to account for that bragging or whatever. But it would be like between 8 and 12 would be the average. And China was at the top at about 21 or something like that women for each guy. The next closest country was like 14 or something like that. So one of the reasons is because even though the government would not like to admit this, but prostitution is very, very prevalent there, which means that actually guys get a lot of practice. They get a lot of practice in learning what turns a woman on. You can pay her so that you can practice that. If you don't have a girl right now, I mean, one thing is there's some virgins in the academy, and one of their issues is when they starts to get sexual, they have no experience in that area. A girl generally, if she's young especially, doesn't want to have to train a guy. The older ladies in their 30s who've had quite, they've been around this sort of a little fetish thing, they might want to train you, but usually the hot girls you're going for will want a sexually confident, sexually experienced man. So I had to actually read up on that as well. You can read female literature, erotica, plus just like sex ed stuff, like where the erogenous zones are and so forth. And that will take you a long way. It's astounding. Sometimes it's just not that uncommon that I get clients who are still virgins, or maybe have had 1 or 2 sexual partners and they're in their 30s. So that's definitely an issue. And it's, in a way you can almost tell just by looking in the way he handles himself, talks, and moves. Anyway, if I can pick it up, the girls definitely are a lot more sensitive to that.